His touch was deliberate, unhurried, as though the entire evening stretched before us, and he intended to savor every moment of discovery. What stunned me wasn't just my desire for this, it was how he seemed to anticipate it before I did. His kiss held familiarity, not like meeting someone new, but like fulfilling an unspoken agreement with perfect intention. When he murmured, "This is your way of repaying me," I understood it wasn't about vengeance. It was something far more perilous. He sought my heart, planning to claim it breath by breath. If this drew you in, remember to hit that like button and subscribe for more tailies where love comes with complications, but always leaves an unforgettable mark. People claim Vermont winters feel like echoes from the past. They speak truth. The leafless trees stood fragile and exposed beside the winding path, their bare branches stark against the heavy sky. Snow didn't dance and swirl like in cinema, it lingered suspended like particles in a forgotten room. Silent, hesitant, colorless, I placed my hand on the car's fogged window. My skin's warmth created an impression that vanished as quickly as I was disappearing from my previous existence. The uniformed driver, who'd barely spoken a handful of words throughout our journey, cleared his throat. "We've arrived, Miss Montgomery." I turned to look. The mansion stood as if it had been expecting visitors for generations. 4 stories of white stone rose before me. Ivy clung to its walls like persistent memories. A curved staircase led to twin oak doors that appeared imposing, yet silent. No illumination, no greeting, just cold architecture with even colder purpose. Stepping out slowly, I pulled my luggage with one hand while clutching a cloth-wrapped package with the other, my mother's keepsake. My heels pressed into the snow, but I didn't pause. I ascended those steps like someone approaching judgment or a battle. Certainly not matrimony. The doors opened before I could announce myself. A woman with gentle eyes and silver-streaked hair stood there, hands clasped over a tidy wool apron. "You must be Elise," she said with warmth. "I'm Martha. Please come inside." "You must be chilled to the bone." Her voice carried the comfort of well-worn blankets and familiar stories. I followed without speaking. The corridor featured dark wood paneling that seemed to absorb light. A grandfather clock's steady rhythm echoed from an unseen location. Constant as a heartbeat dot, we passed a grand staircase and several closed rooms before Martha guided me into a sitting area where flames flickered low in the hearth. "You'll meet Mr. Caldwell shortly," she explained. "Perhaps some tea while you wait?" I nodded. Words hadn't caught up with my choices yet. I hadn't traveled here seeking romance. I'd come because my father had signed documents, and I'd signed others to rescue him. 3 years, he'd explained. Simply 3 years. After that, you're free to leave. He hadn't mentioned what I'd sacrifice in between or how it would feel to be transferred like a transaction receipt. When Martha departed, I settled near the fireplace and unwrapped the cloth bundle. Inside lay several sketches my mother had created during her final weeks. Houses. She adored drawing homes. Not structures or blueprints. Homes. Windows with drapery. Gardens with benches. Front porches with weathered paint and wind chimes. Shuffled through the pages and stopped abruptly. One sketch showed a white stone house with square windows and an arched entrance. A second-story balcony with iron railings. Ivy covering the walls. This house, I stared, recognition undeniable. My mother had never seen this place. She'd passed away before my father ever encountered the man who now owned it. Yet here it was, captured in pencil and ink by her weakening hands. I remained motionless, unblinking. The fire crackled, but I felt no warmth. What were the chances? What kind of pattern was this? Coincidence or something more ancient, something woven into bloodlines? Behind me, footsteps approached. I rose quickly, closing the package. Smoothing my hands over my coat as if I could calm my nerves through the gesture, he appeared in the doorway tall, broad-shouldered, dressed in gray like shadows themselves, Ethan Caldwell. His features were handsome in the way sculptures are, beautiful yet cold, never intended for human touch. His eyes resembled winter steel, his jaw set, hair swept back with a control that seemed both purposeful and weary. "Elise," he said simply. I nodded once. "Mr. Caldwell." A pause stretched between us. "This arrangement," he began, "isn't about romance." I trust that was made clear. Another nod. "Yes, 3 years. I'll reside here, play the role when necessary. After that, I leave. Debt cleared. No obligations remaining." His tone was so measured, so emotionless. It felt more like accepting employment than agreeing to become someone's wife. I straightened my shoulders. Understood. He studied me for a long moment, as if determining whether I was dishonest or simply young. Then, with a brief nod, he turned and left. No handshake, no smile, no mention of the wedding scheduled for the following morning. Just footsteps retreating down the hall and the soft echo of a door closing upstairs. I sat back down slowly. My hands returned to the sketch without conscious thought. I traced the house's outline again. For some reason, I remembered something. My mother used to say when I was small, some places don't wait for us to discover them. They call to us quietly through time and family and forgotten memories. I closed my eyes. Perhaps I hadn't come here because of a contract. Maybe somehow this place had always been waiting, even for someone like me. Unwanted, unremarkable, unchosen. A girl about to marry a man who felt nothing for her in a house her mother had dreamed of before death claimed her. The fire popped softly, and for the first time since signing those papers, I allowed myself to feel something small and strange. Not hope exactly, but its shadow, waiting like light behind a locked door. The house fell silent after our evening meal. Not oppressively quiet, just peaceful in a way that made even my breathing feel disruptive. I remained in the sitting room long after Martha had cleared the dishes. I wasn't certain if I was expected to go upstairs or if he would seek me out, or if this strange liminal state, half wife, half stranger, meant neither of us needed to make the first move. Eventually, I climbed the stairs. Each step felt rehearsed, like walking into a performance someone else had written for me. The bedroom was spacious, softly illuminated, and surprisingly warm. A fire danced in the hearth. The bed, massive, carved from oak, appeared too luxurious for sleep, too formal for touching. I sat on its edge. My palms were damp, my thoughts louder than ever. It wasn't fear, not really. I didn't believe Ethan would harm me. He hadn't even looked at me the way a man regards a woman. He'd observed me like a business arrangement, but something deeper was stirring now, something I couldn't name. Desire, curiosity, loneliness, perhaps. I changed into the silk robe Martha had laid out. It glided over my skin like moonlight. I stood by the window for a long while, watching snow drift across the garden path below, my reflection ghostly in the glass. I didn't hear him enter. I only sensed the shift in atmosphere. I turned. Ethan stood in the doorway, jacket removed. Sleeves rolled up, his expression unreadable. There was no hunger in his gaze, no demand, just presence, stillness. I wasn't sure if I should wait, I said softly, immediately regretting how uncertain I sounded. "You don't have to do anything," he replied. His voice was lower than I recalled, rougher. "I know," I said, "but perhaps I don't want to do nothing." That gave him pause. He stepped into the room slowly, as if testing the ground beneath us. "I don't want to be another transaction," I whispered. "Not tonight." His jaw tensed. "You're not, but I was." A beat of silence. Then he moved closer, but not completely. I've never experienced this before, I admitted, speaking more to the fireplace. Than to him. I know. That surprised me. You do. I can see it, he said gently. And how you look away when I look at you, how you hold your breath. I nodded once. And I'm not here to take anything from you, Elise, he continued. Not even if I've paid for it on paper. Then why did you agree to this arrangement? He didn't answer immediately, just sat on the bed's edge across from me, elbows on his knees. I made a promise to someone, he said finally. Someone who asked me to ensure you'd be safe, even if you never understood why. My throat tightened. My mother? He didn't respond, but he didn't need to. Something in my chest cracked quietly. I hated you for this, I admitted. I thought you were punishing me, and now, I don't know. He looked at me then. Really looked not like a man studying a business deal, not like someone trying to understand what he owned, but like someone seeing a person for the first time. If you want me to leave, he said, rising, I will. I stood too, not even realizing I had. I don't want you to leave. He stopped. We were inches apart now. The fire behind him cast soft light on his jaw's sharp edge, the crease between his brows, the glint in his eyes. I reached out. I touched his shirt first at the wrist where fabric folded up, then his forearm. His breath caught. I looked up at him. I want to remember this night for myself. Not because I had to, but because I chose it. For the first time, he reached for me. His hand found my waist. The other rose to cradle my face's side. He kissed me slowly, like a question, not a claim. And I answered, not with words, but with how my fingers tangled in his shirt's collar, how my lips parted, how my body leaned into his uncertain but open. He never rushed, never pulled, never pushed. He let me decide everything. Each movement, each permission. And when we finally lay down together, there was no soundtrack, no dramatic flourish, just skin meeting skin, breath meeting breath, and something unspoken blooming. Between us like spring amid snow. When it was over, we lay still, not awkward, just quiet. He looked at me like I was no longer a stranger in his house. And for the first time, I didn't feel like one. Morning arrived quietly. No trumpets, no universal shift. Just a pale beam of light slipping through tall windows, brushing my shoulder. Like an afterthought. I woke before Ethan, or perhaps he was already awake, lying still beside me so I wouldn't stir. Either way, the room felt softer than the night before, like something unspoken had settled and made itself comfortable. I watched the fire die out. I watched snow on the balcony rail melt into slow silver drops. I let myself pretend for a moment that I wasn't married by contract, that this wasn't borrowed time. Then I rose. The robe I wore felt warmer than the night before. Not because of the fabric, but because of how I'd worn it freely, willingly. It made a difference. I padded downstairs. Barefoot. Martha was already in the kitchen, humming something low and melancholy as she stirred a pot on the stove. She smiled when she saw me. Good morning, dear. You look rested, I blushed. She poured tea into 2 ceramic mugs and handed me one without asking. It smelled of cinnamon and orange peel. Thank you, I said. You're welcome. She paused, then added, That's how your mother used to take it, isn't it? I froze. You knew my mother? Martha nodded slowly, her hands cradling her own mug like it held more than warmth, like it held time itself. She used to visit this house years ago before it belonged to Ethan. I swallowed. Why? She and Mr. Caldwell Sr. were part of the same charity board. She helped design the community center in town. They met several times, and she came here once or twice to deliver sketches. She smiled softly. And cookies. She always brought cookies. I sat at the kitchen table, the wood warm beneath my hands. I didn't know that. There's much you don't know, she said kindly. Not because you weren't told, but because no one thought you'd ever end up back here. Back here, the words echoed. This wasn't just Ethan's house. Somehow it had been mine once in the dreams of a woman who'd never mentioned it. I looked around again. The blue tile backsplash, the low windows above the sink, the banister's curve in the hallway. Small things I remembered in pencil from my mother's sketches. I held them up tighter. Did she ever meet Ethan? Martha nodded. Briefly. He was 19, angry, lost. His father had just passed away. Your mother? She had a way of seeing people through all that. I imagined her offering him cookies, probably talking too much, probably humming like she always did. She gave him tea, I said aloud, remembering suddenly the day she taught me to add orange peel to the pot. Martha's eyes sparkled. That she did. When I returned to the upstairs hallway, Ethan was standing before a window, shirt half buttoned, coffee in hand. He didn't turn when I stepped in. I didn't mean to wake you, I said. You didn't. A pause. I talked to Martha, I added. Still he didn't turn. Did she tell you? She told me my mother came here, that she met you. He nodded once, slowly. She didn't tell me you made a promise to her? This time he did turn. His expression wasn't surprised, but something in it was weary guarded. She asked me to take care of you if anything ever happened. Back then, I didn't know what that meant, and now I do. I waited. He walked over to the armchair near the fireplace and sat down, elbows on his knees again, like the night before. She visited me when I wasn't okay. I just dropped out of college. My father was gone. Everything I thought I was building crumbled overnight. His voice was steady, but his eyes flickered. She brought tea, told me my pain didn't make me worthless, that I didn't have to prove anything to anyone, that sometimes strength looks like showing up when no one's asking you to. I bit the inside of my cheek hard. That sounds like her. She said one day I'd meet someone who'd need the same kind of reminder. He looked at me now. She said it might not look like fate, that it might look like obligation, but that if I paid attention, I'd know the difference. A silence settled between us, heavy, but not unwelcome. Is that why you married me? I asked finally, because of a promise? No, he said. I married you because I was angry at your father, at myself, at the past. I nodded slowly. But I stayed. He added, because of the promise. That undid something in me. I sat beside him on the chair's arm, not quite touching. I don't need a rescuer, Ethan. I know. I don't need you to fix what my father broke. I know. I turned to him. But I do need the truth. All of it. No more silence. He looked up at me, his expression gentler than I'd ever seen it. Then here's the truth, he said. You weren't just part of a deal. You were part of a promise I made before I understood what. Promises cost, and I don't regret it. I nodded once. Then I leaned down and kissed his cheek. Not like the night before, not with heat or urgency, but with something older, quieter, like forgiveness, like gratitude, like beginning again. The doorbell chimed just after noon. I was in the kitchen helping Martha dust off some old jars when we heard it. 3 short rings, sharp and confident. I didn't need to check the camera. I knew who it was. Toby, 12 years old, taller every time I blinked, still wearing that same red sweater with the missing button under the collar. He ran up the steps and launched into my arms like he was still 8. Elise. He shouted into my neck. I laughed louder than I had in weeks. You said I could visit when the snow stuck to the porch, he added. It stuck yesterday. Of course it did, I said, ruffling his hair. You always keep your promises. He stepped back and looked up at Ethan, who had appeared at the stairs top. Ethan didn't smile, but he didn't frown either. This is my husband, I said awkwardly. Ethan. Toby stared for a moment. You look like someone who built robots. Ethan raised one eyebrow. That's a compliment. I whispered Dot we spent the afternoon. In the library. Toby was obsessed with typewriters, apparently. He discovered an old Remington in the corner and proceeded to type the word fart repeatedly on parchment while Ethan pretended not to notice. I watched them from across the room. Ethan sat in his leather armchair, reading or pretending to read. Toby flitted around like a wound-up toy. Then somehow they started discussing architecture, about bridges, about the difference between steel and glass. Glass is cooler, Toby declared. You can see through it, but it still holds stuff up. Ethan nodded. It's honest. Toby looked up. You like honest things? Ethan hesitated. I'm trying to. That was the moment something shifted after dinner. Toby insisted on showing Ethan how to make cocoa the right way with milk, not water, and a pinch of salt to make it taste richer. They stood side by side in the kitchen, Toby barking instructions like a tiny general, Ethan following them without argument. I watched from the doorway and saw something I hadn't seen before. Not just in Ethan, but in myself. I saw what it might look like to stay. Not out of obligation, not out of debt, but because something real had begun to grow here quietly, steadily, later, after Toby had gone to bed and the house was dim with evening. I found Ethan sitting in the reading room. The fire was low. He had his glasses on, something I'd never seen before. You were good with him, I said. He looked up, startled. I wasn't trying to be. Maybe that's why it worked. He closed the book in his lap. He reminds me of someone you used to be. Maybe, before I decided feelings were liabilities. They still are, I said, sitting beside him. They just don't always destroy you. He didn't answer right away. I'm sorry your first weeks here were so cold, he said finally. They weren't. He turned to me. They were quiet, I corrected, but not cold. There's a difference. Our hands rested on the same cushion between us, not touching, but close. I used to think silence was easier than mistakes, he said. But silence is a kind of mistake, too. He nodded. I looked at him, at the soft wrinkle above his brow, the slight curve of his mouth, the way he looked both older than his years and younger than his wounds. I reached for his hand. He looked down in surprise. Then slowly he closed. His fingers over mine. It was the first time we touched without tension, without duty, just presence, just warmth. I stood. He looked up at me, waiting, and I leaned down, wrapping my arms around his shoulders. Not because he needed it, but because I did. His arms came around me slowly, carefully, like I was something rare, precious. Not because I was fragile, but because he wasn't used to holding anything that wanted to be held. We stayed like that for a long time. When I finally pulled back, he didn't speak. He just nodded once, like maybe finally he understood something words couldn't say. And for the first time, I didn't feel like I was surviving this arrangement. I felt like I was part of it. The storm came quietly. No lightning, no drama, just a slow, steady curtain of snow falling through the gray sky, dusting the trees, blanketing the world in stillness. I sat by the window in the art room, what used to be the conservatory, Martha told me. Light poured in through the glass ceiling, filtered and soft, like a memory you don't want to wake from. On my lap, a folder of my mother's sketches, the last ones she ever made. I'd been avoiding them, not out of pain exactly, but because I wasn't ready to finish something she hadn't. But today felt different. Maybe because Toby had left that morning, hugging both of us like we were a real couple, promising to write every week. Maybe because Ethan had taken to making me tea in the evenings without asking how I liked it and getting it right every time. Or maybe because deep down I wanted to give her something back. I opened the folder. There it was again, the white stone house. Arched entry, ivy. Second floor balcony. Every line perfectly drawn except one section left blank, the front door. She'd drawn everything except the door. I didn't know why. Maybe she ran out of time. Maybe she never knew how to draw it in. Or maybe she wanted someone else to finish it. I picked up my pencil. At first, my hand shook. Then it steadied. I sketched an open door, not wide, just enough to show it wasn't locked, that someone had gone in or was about to come out. I shaded, in a faint silhouette just behind it. Not detailed, just human. When I was done, I didn't cry, I just exhaled. And something inside me softened. That evening, I left the drawing on the hallway table. I didn't hide it, but I didn't announce it either. If Ethan saw it, he didn't mention it. Not until the next night, I found him in the study, staring at the fireplace. He looked like he hadn't moved in hours, but I knew he had. He just carried stillness with him, like most men carried noise. I saw the drawing, he said. I sat beside him. He didn't look at me, just kept watching the flames. I've lived in that house all my life, he continued, and I never noticed there was no front door. I waited. I always thought it was complete strong. Fortified, he exhaled, but maybe it was just closed. We were silent for a while. Then he turned to me. You made it open. Someone had to, I said gently. He looked down, his fingers brushing over his cufflink, then resting in his lap. When I was a boy, he said, I used to think I'd grow up to be like my father-controlled, respected, untouchable. He smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes, but all I became was unreachable. I reached over, placing my hand on his. You're not unreachable, I said. You're just used to being alone. He didn't argue. I could see the weight in his shoulders, something deeper than pride, not arrogance, just defense. A life lived behind polished windows and silent dinners. I want to change that, he said suddenly, my breath caught. I don't know how, he added quickly. But I want to, I squeezed his hand. Then start by leaving the door open. He laughed once quiet but real. That easy? No, I said, but worth it. The next morning, I found a note slipped under my door. No envelope, just handwriting. Neat, precise, but unsure. I saw your silhouette in the drawing. Not walking in, not walking out, just standing there waiting. I don't know what you're waiting for, Elise, but if it's me, I'm ready. My hands trembled a little, not from nerves, from something bigger, from knowing that slowly, impossibly, we were becoming more than names on a contract. We were becoming something closer to home. That afternoon, he met me in the conservatory. He didn't speak right away, just looked around as if he hadn't seen this room in years, even though he lived here. This was my mother's favorite room, he said. She used to sit right there by that window and hum old songs. I can see why, I said. I hated this room after she died. I never came back. And now? He looked at me. I think I needed to remember she wasn't perfect, that she had sadness too, that she knew what it meant to want something and not say it out loud. I stepped closer, and now you're saying it. I'm trying. I reached up, touched his face. I hear you, and I did. I heard everything. The regret, the hope, the apology that didn't need words, the longing that had waited too long when we kissed. It wasn't urgent. It wasn't like the first night. It was steadier, truer, and I wasn't afraid of it. I wasn't afraid of him or of myself. Not anymore, because I had drawn the door open and he had chosen to walk through it. The call came just after. Lunch? I wasn't meant to hear it, but when your husband has a voice like a blade and the walls in a 100-year-old house are thin, secrets don't last long. We'll lose the vote if she stays married to you. A pause. No, Ethan. There's no debate. Her father's name is a stain on your record. You've rebuilt the company's image for years. Don't undo it for a girl. I froze outside the study door. Not because I was surprised, but because I wasn't. Because deep down, I had known this would come. A marriage like ours built on silence, repaired with whispers, was never going to be easy to explain. Not to investors, not to partners, not to men who wore power like armor and expected their peers to do the same. I stepped away before Ethan could answer. That night, I packed in silence. Not much, just the essentials. A few clothes, the pencil set I always kept in rolled canvas, the drawing of the house with the open door. I left the rest. Some things don't belong to you forever, even if they once felt like home. He found me in the doorway of the guest room. His expression was unreadable, but his hands were clenched, and that told me everything. You heard, he said. I nodded. He swallowed. It's not what it sounds like. Maybe not, I said. But it's still what it is. He stepped forward. I didn't agree with them, but you didn't say no. That landed. He looked down, jaw tight. I understand, I said. You've worked your whole life to clean up after other people's messes. I won't be another one. You're not. I was, I cut in gently. Even if just by name, even if just in their eyes. We stood there, silence hanging between us like frost on glass. He looked like he wanted to say something, anything, but couldn't find the words. So I said them for him. You chose your company, your name, and maybe that's not wrong. He flinched. It's okay, I added. Truly, I want you to keep what you built. You deserve that. His voice broke when he spoke again. What if I don't care about any of it anymore? I looked at him for a long time and smiled. Then you'll have to come find me. He didn't stop me as I walked down the hall. Didn't chase. Didn't call out. But when I reached the front door, I turned back. He was standing at the top of the stairs, just watching, like he couldn't decide if this was the end or the beginning of something else. I'll leave the door open, I said. And then I stepped out into the snow. I rented a room above a florist shop 3 towns over. Small, quiet, a twin bed and a window that overlooked nothing special. But it was mine. I didn't cry the first night. I just slept for the first time in months without the weight of expectations or the warmth of another body beside mine. I missed him, but I didn't regret leaving. Some goodbyes are not the end of love. They are the beginning of integrity. I found work at a local bookstore, 3 afternoons a week. The rest of the time I sketched mostly houses, always with the door open. One morning, a woman came in asking for help designing a reading room for her granddaughter. I showed her a sketch. She asked for more. A week later, someone else called. Word spreads fast in small towns. By the 3rd month, I had enough. Commissions to start thinking about a studio space. Martha wrote to me once a simple card. He's quieter without you, but he's not cold. And he looks at that drawing every morning like it's trying to speak. I kept the card in my coat pocket, read it every time I doubted myself, every time I missed him, which was often. But I still didn't go back, because this time, if he wanted to build something with me, he'd have to come stand at the door, not hide behind it. One evening, as I closed the shop, the florist handed me a package. No name, she said, just this. It was a roll of sketch paper. I unrolled it at home, heart already THUDING. It was my mother's house again, the white stone, the ivy, the balcony. But someone had added something. The front door, slightly more open, and inside the doorway, a man's silhouette, and beside him, a second figure, smaller, curved. A woman. 2 words were written in the corner, and a hand I knew by heart, still waiting. It had been 46 days. I hadn't counted on purpose, but some part of me kept track, like a clock hidden beneath skin, ticking softly beneath every heartbeat. 40-6 days since I walked out of the white stone house. 46 mornings without his coffee beside mine. without his presence across a room, without the quiet gravity of him like furniture that had always been there until it wasn't. I didn't expect a letter, and I certainly didn't expect a package, but one arrived anyway. No return address, just my name written in that unmistakably neat, slightly slanted handwriting I'd memorized without trying. Inside, a flat parcel wrapped in brown paper and tied with simple string. I held it for a long time before opening it. When I finally did, my breath caught Dot. It was a drawing. The house again, the same white stone, ivy climbing in careful curls. But something had changed. The front door, once closed, then ajar in my own version, was now drawn wide open. And standing in the doorway, no longer in silhouette, was a man. And beside him, a woman. Their outlines were faint, not overly detailed, but they were there facing outward, not leaving, not hiding, waiting Dot in the bottom right corner, written in small, careful script. This time, the door doesn't close. Didn't cry. I just sat with the sketch in my lap for a long time, fingers tracing the lines. Every inch of it was familiar, but now it was complete. Not because it was perfect, but because it was shared, because someone had dared to finish something. With me Dot later that evening, I left the drawing propped on the easel in my tiny studio. I turned off the light, but before I left the room, I whispered, "I see you." The next week passed in a strange haze. I kept expecting something more, a call, a knock on the door, a car idling out front, but nothing came. Just the drawing, just silence, but it was a different kind of silence now. Not absence, not fear, just space. The kind you leave when you trust someone enough to fill it on their own. I went about my days, finishing commissions, helping the florist with her spring layout. I even found myself humming again. Then one afternoon, as I was sweeping the floor of the shop, the bell above the door chimed. I looked up. It wasn't him. It was Martha. Her coat was dusted with rain, her hair pulled back like always. She held a small paper bag in one hand and wore the same expression she always had one of: deep knowing and quiet amusement. "I figured you'd be stubborn," she said. I blinked. "What?" "But I thought you should know," she added, placing the bag on the counter, "that he's still sitting in that room every morning, still staring at that fireplace, still holding that sketch. Like it's the only thing tethering him to the ground." I swallowed. "He doesn't need a rescue, Elise," she said. "But he does need a reason." I looked at her. "A reason for what?" "To believe the door really stays open." She left without saying anything else. In the bag, a tin of the cinnamon orange tea I loved and a small fold.